GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to Friday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. We've got a great show lined up for you today.
We certainly have. We'll be going live to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, who will be giving a speech in Belfast in the next few minutes. And of course, we've got our great studio guests with us here too, who will be analysing everything that goes on.
Should Andrew Bridgen have had the Conservative whip withdrawn following a controversial tweet about COVID vaccines? We'll be speaking with two MPs who have different views about it.
I know we are watching a very public breakdown of Prince Harry, where we'll be speaking to a leading psychologist. And should we have minimum service levels during strikes? We'll be speaking to Health Minister Maria Caulfield.
And of course, we want to hear from you this morning, so if you want to get in touch, get with the show, email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we start, here are the latest headlines with the wonderful Rhiannon.
Thank you very much, Philip. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Scotland's First Minister says talks held with the Prime Minister last night were constructive and cordial. Rishi Sunak and Nicola Sturgeon will announce millions of pounds in government funding today to drive growth in Scotland. Downing Street says the money will go towards creating thousands of jobs and opportunities, as well as boosting the country's economy. Ms Sturgeon said there was no indication from Mr Sunak that there'd be any additional funding to stop strike action within the NHS. The economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% between October and November. That's despite the soaring cost of living. The Office for National Statistics recorded a slowdown in growth, though, after a 0.5% increase the previous month. It says the economy was helped by people filling the pubs to watch the World Cup. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government has a clear plan to halve inflation this year and get the economy growing again. The Labour leader will state his personal commitment to fixing the Northern Ireland Protocol very shortly, a warning the following contains flashing images. Sir Keir Starmer will deliver a speech in Belfast in the next few minutes where he'll promise his party will remain a good faith guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. He'll also urge the Prime Minister to resolve the issues over the post-Brexit trading arrangements. We'll cross live to that speech as we get it. Tory backbenchers are calling for tougher action on social media bosses if they fail to protect children from damaging online content. A host of former cabinet ministers want bosses of online platforms to face prison if they continue to allow young people to access harmful content. They're pushing for the government to accept changes to the Online Safety Bill, due to return to the House of Commons for debate on Tuesday. Culture Secretary Michelle Donnellan says she isn't ruling out the proposed plans. A man has been charged with the murder of 26-year-old Elle Edwards, who was shot outside a pub in Wirral on Christmas Eve. 22-year-old Connor Chapman from Woodchurch has also been charged on 2 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm. He's been remanded in custody and will appear in court later. Merseyside Police says a 23-year-old woman arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender has been released on bail. Over half of migrants who claimed to be victims of modern slavery after crossing the Channel in the first half of last year were Albanian. Home Office data shows over 1,000 people made an asylum claim between January and June. Of these, 591 were Albanian. That's up from 11% the previous year. Official figures reveal that in the whole of 2022, over 45,000 people crossed the English Channel in small boats. And councils issued nearly 20,000 parking fines a day on average last year. The figures obtained by Churchill Motor Insurance show a 12% rise on the previous year. It drove up revenue for councils to over £750,000 a day last year, up from £35,000 in 2021. And we're going to cross live now to Sir Keir Starmer, Labour leader, who's making a speech in Belfast. We'll cross live to him now. Here's Sir Keir Starmer.
So I'd like to thank the President and Vice President for the invitation today. This is a special place, a first-class university for research, technology and innovation, business and health. An institution that's always been rooted in its communities here in Belfast and in Northern Ireland, but which also enjoys a huge global reach, a reach never more on display than in the appointment of your chancellors, and we can see them on the wall here today. After all, who better to carry the message of peace this city embodies around the world than Hillary Clinton? I've been here to Queen's many times. In fact, I remember the last time clearly because I was halfway through my speech when the United Kingdom announced a vote on Article 50. What a relief it is that that's all now behind us. Now, that day, when I last came, I came here to reflect on the success of the Police Service of Northern Ireland and my role as the Human Rights Advisor to the Policing Board, which oversees it. I'm immensely proud of the work of the board, of that whole period in my life. It's given me a lasting love of Northern Ireland, friendships that have endured, including people in this room here today. Memories I'll always cherish. And you know, after we were married, my wife and I took our first holiday here because I wanted to show her Northern Ireland, the people and the communities that I'd met. I was in love with this island, and that love has stayed with me. It's also taught me so much about politics, about change, about the power of hope. And this year is a moment of reflection for Northern Ireland, and speaking for myself, standing here in 2023, it's hard to describe just how different it feels to the Northern Ireland of 20 years ago, when I first came to take up my role here. How raw the emotions were back then, in a country still coming to terms with its hard-won but fragile peace. I wanted a chance to serve because it felt like a huge moment, a chance to turn the pages on decades, if not centuries, of pain. And I wanted to make a contribution, help to create a lasting institution, one that could reach out to all communities, hold the police to account, and in doing so, help preserve the peace for future generations. I think we did that. Accountability, transparency, human rights. The framework we put in place was critical for both communities to have a degree of faith that the police service of Northern Ireland was new, was different, was worth those first risky steps. We were tested, of course, every day. As Tony Blair said at the time, every advance made in the name of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement has to be ground out. But over time, policing in Northern Ireland did change. The PSNI did become an institution which enjoys cross-community support. Catholics did sign up to serve. Not enough. In Northern Ireland, you can always point to the work that still needs to be done. But if you'd said to us then, in 2003, that in 20 years we'd have the PSNI we have today, that one day a Sinn Féin leader would stand shoulder to shoulder with unionist leaders in a campaign to help recruit new officers, yes, that would have felt like an achievement worth celebrating. And there are people here today who deserve huge credit for helping to make that happen. Now, this year should be a year we celebrate achievements like that. All the achievements, big and small, of the Good Friday Agreement. 25 years of relative peace, prosperity, and a better Northern Ireland. It's a proud moment for me, reflecting on the small role I played in that. And it's obviously a huge moment for my party. The Good Friday Agreement is the greatest achievement of the Labour Party in my lifetime, without question. But of course, the real achievement, the real pride, belongs to the people and the communities here in Northern Ireland. It's your bravery, your determination, your courage, resilience, and yes, your willingness to sacrifice, to compromise, to stand despite everything in the shoes of other communities, and above all, to keep doing so when there were bumps in the road, provocations, outbreaks of violence. That's what won this peace. It's why I fell in love with this place. I'd never seen anything like that spirit, that hope. I talk a lot about hope at the moment, about how hard it is for people to get through the challenges we face without the real possibility of something better. How, as we lurch from crisis to crisis, we're losing our faith that the future will be better for our children. Some communities in the United Kingdom might once have taken that for granted, but not here. Because what I saw in Northern Ireland 20 years ago were people and communities experiencing that hope for the first time. It's what powered the Good Friday Agreement, drove the communities of this country on towards the history they made. And we've got to get it back. Because I get the sense, with the protocol, with the political situation at Stormont, not to mention the other problems we see here, the NHS, the cost of living, an economy on its knees, that the thought of April being a true celebration feels a little on ice. I understand that. Anniversaries are hard in Northern Ireland. Looking back is hard. Even when we do so with pride, as we should in April, it's tough. The past is a painful place for so many people, so many communities. People have suffered a lot. And with that comes a fear. Fear that if we stop trying to move forward, if things grind to a halt, then we could yet go backwards. It's why, here more than anywhere, you always need that hope of a better future. That's the spirit of 1998. That's what the Good Friday Agreement asked of people. It wasn't to forgive or forget. They were demands that could never be made. It was only to look forward, to commit to a journey, walk step by step, each stride difficult, each stride precious, towards a better future together. The anniversary this year should be a true celebration. People deserve that. History was made here, hard won. But to respect that history, people also deserve action on the issues which currently hold Northern Ireland back. For politics to do its job and give people the chance to look forward with hope. Now, there is a small window of opportunity before April. We've got to use the anniversary to fix minds, get the country and its political process moving forward again, deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. I see two key priorities for this. They're both urgent, both need to happen now. And so, of course, they rely on a change of direction from the Prime Minister. But in each priority, I also want to show the values I will bring to Northern Ireland if I have the honour to serve as Prime Minister. First, the British government must normalise and strengthen relationships with Dublin. The Taoiseach held out an olive branch in recent weeks. We must take it. But honestly, relations should never have been this strained. Brexit was a rupture in the UK's diplomatic stance, a call to change in every area of our society, which had to be recognised. I've been very clear about this. My government will make it work. We'll take on the mantle of that vote. We'll turn its slogans into practical solutions. Yet throughout the last 7 years, nothing has been more self-defeating than the determination of some Conservative ministers to see our friends in Dublin as adversaries on Brexit. That has damaged the political process here in Northern Ireland, no question. And it's certainly not the spirit of 1998. We should never lose sight of what binds us together on these islands. Our shared commitment to peace here, above all other considerations. So I encourage the Prime Minister, as the Taoiseach has said, to recognise past mistakes. It will help him with the second priority, the obvious one, the protocol. Look, there's no point varnishing the truth. To get beyond the current stalemate, we have to make the protocol work. Nobody wants to see unnecessary checks on goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We just need to find a solution. And I want to commend the recent agreement on trade data sharing, commend the EU, commend the government. If they are finally serious about a deal, there will be no sniping from us. I can promise you that. I go back to the Good Friday Agreement. The pride we feel in the Labour Party towards it has no bounds. But we know the political effort didn't just come from us, from Tony Blair and Mo Molan. It didn't come just from Bertie Ahern and Mary McAleese, from the unwavering support from the US, Bill Clinton, George Mitchell, or the tenacity and brilliance of John Hume and David Trimble. It was also built on the work of John Major and Albert Reynolds, and afterwards by Lord Patten, whose commission led to the PSNI and the Policing Board in the first place. My point is this: the spirit of 1998 on both islands is not one of tribal politics. This is the process which brought Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness together, and they made it work. There can be no clearer example than that. So I say to the Prime Minister, if there is a deal to do in coming weeks, do it. Whatever political cover you need, whatever mechanisms in Westminster you require, if it delivers for our national interest and the people of Northern Ireland, we will support you. The time for action on the protocol is now. The time to stand up to the ERG is now. The time to put Northern Ireland above a Brexit purity cult which can never be satisfied is now. We can find ways to remove the majority of checks. A bespoke SPS agreement, a monitoring system that eradicates checks on goods that will only ever be sold in Northern Ireland. The opportunity for these reforms is there, and they would deliver for communities and businesses across these islands. Northern Ireland can be prosperous under the protocol, but it requires leadership from you, Prime Minister. And look, I enjoyed my dialogue with the DUP and unionist parties yesterday. So I want to reach out on this, speak to all unionist communities. There are legitimate problems with the protocol, and these must be recognised in any negotiations. And as for the process that got us here to this point, I think your anger about that is more than justified. I said this yesterday. I will say it here, and I want every community in Northern Ireland to hear it. The Labour Party will always be a good faith guarantor of the Constitution and the principle of consent. That commitment is written into the agreement we want to celebrate in April. It stands above politics. It should stand above Brexit negotiations as well. I think people know that we would have done things differently, and that we will stand by those values when in government. But I also want to say this. In the coming weeks, it's possible there will be siren voices in Westminster that say again, there's another path, a path that doesn't require compromise on the protocol. In fact, it's possible those siren voices will include, may even be led by, the very people who created the protocol.
That was Keir Starmer in Belfast making his speech where he talks about the Northern Ireland Protocol, saying that if the government and the EU could come to a deal, the Labour Party would support it too, and where he said that the Labour Party under him would take on the mantle of Brexit and make it work. Well, we're joined in the studio and throughout the show by Mark Littlewood, Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Frank McKenna, Chief Executive of Downtown in Business. Frank, as a Labour Party sort of supporter, what did you make of what Keir Starmer was saying there?
I don't think there are any surprises. I mean, I think what Keir Starmer has done over the past couple of years is moved the Labour Party and his own position to a more pragmatic place, because clearly the countries voted for Brexit. We're never going back into the European Union. I know that will disappoint some people within the Labour Party and Remainers, but the fact of the matter is that the European Union would find it difficult to do a deal to take us back in to that club. So I think the pragmatism is shining through increasingly. But I think what he's done today is basically re-established the split that's existed in the Conservative Party for generations over Europe. And, you know, what David Cameron thought he was doing with the referendum was ending that split. And what we've seen since the Brexit vote is actually that split continues, because you've still got a big number of people in the Conservative Party who think that we should have close ties with the EU. We've got others who don't. I think the key line there, and one that will work for him, was this idea that the Conservative Party have become a Brexit purity cult. Thought that was a good line. Thought it was a good soundbite.
But I think he was just talking about the ERG. But if I just turn to Mark Littlewood there, see, I heard it slightly different. I heard it from a Remainer speaking, saying, let's water down Brexit, not let you can trust us, but we'll water it down. If there is a deal to be done, we'll do it. You know, if it delivers for the national interest, Northern Ireland, we'll support it. How did you hear, or how did you take his speech?
Well, I've got to admit, I find it increasingly difficult to disagree with Keir Starmer, but that's principally because he doesn't really say anything. It's quite difficult to disagree with somebody who doesn't say anything. Look, he's right on the analysis here. The Northern Ireland Protocol's a problem. And the problem is quite simple to explain and not very easy to solve. The problem is that, in effect, the EU is worried that UK goods will leak over into the Republic of Ireland, and that means that Northern Ireland isn't a fully engaged part of the UK economy, and there are, you know, forms and trade barriers there and all of the rest of it. That is indeed a problem. Keir Starmer sort of said, well, if there's a deal to be done, let's do it. Well, fine, but what is that deal? How do we actually crack that problem? And you can get into quite a lot of complex technical things about how you barcode and tag goods and all of the rest of it. But at the moment, the Brexit deal that was struck treats one of the four constituent parts of the United Kingdom differently to the other three, and has erected trade barriers within the United Kingdom. And I think I can fully understand why unionists, not just unionists, people who are trying to run businesses in Northern Ireland, find that pretty intolerable. And I'm not quite sure what Keir Starmer's solution is, other than he wants one.
I mean, do you think, though, coming back to Frank's point, do you think that actually Keir Starmer's trying to put a wedge within the Conservative Party by saying, look, we'll support the government, and knowing that actually that there'll be lots of Conservative backbenchers, therefore, who won't? Is that? I mean, is it?
No doubt about it. What he's done really quite cleverly as leader of the opposition, and if the opinion polls are to be believed, he has every chance of being the British Prime Minister after the next election, is that he's slayed a lot of the dragons that were really problematic for the Labour Party. As Frank said, Brexit, perhaps reluctantly by some, but seems to be an accepted settlement. And I think this Northern Ireland Protocol is more likely to cause divisions in the Conservative Party than in the Labour Party. And, you know, he will exploit that electorally. I mean, I dare say that his heart's in the right place.
With us, Frank McKenna, you'll be staying with us, but coming up after the break,
we're going to be speaking to a Conservative MP for Gravesham, Adam Holloway, about the suspension of Andrew Bridgen. You won't want to miss that.
And
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just gone 10:25. Now, Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen has lost the party whip after his controversial tweet, which said, as one cardiologist said to me, this is the biggest crime against humanity since the Holocaust.
Bridgen's comments about the vaccines have provoked outrage from Jewish groups and come after weeks of increasingly hostile statements by the MP towards the government's rollout of the COVID vaccines.
So we'll be speaking to Adam Holloway in a moment, and we'll be speaking to Michael Fabricant. But just let's bring it back to Mark in the studio, Frank in the studio. His comments and the tweet, should he have lost the whip?
It's a tricky one. I mean, I think what he said is quite crazy, even if you take his slightly bizarre and, I believe, unfounded views about the risks of the vaccine. What's he been suspended for? Is it vaccine scepticism, or is it anti-Semitism, or is it reporting what a cardiologist said to him that might have been anti-vax or anti-Semitic? I don't derive any anti-Semitism from this tweet. I think the tweet itself suggests that even Andrew Bridgen admits that the Holocaust was considerably worse than the vaccine rollout programme. That I seem to derive from the tweet. So I would think it's people who have suffered since the Holocaust who might take objection to this as well. The vaccine rollout programme has not been the biggest crime against humanity. It's actually saved humanity. Now, for the Conservative Party, I don't believe you are diminishing Andrew Bridgen's freedom of speech or anybody else if you remove the party whip. Parties have various sort of policies, platforms, positions they take. And if it's the position of the Conservative Party that spouting medical nonsense means you're not fit to be a Conservative MP, then they can remove the whip. But I'm unclear of the basis upon which the whip's been removed. Is it the Holocaust reference or the vaccination reference?
Well, I mean, I'm presuming, I don't know, because obviously I wasn't privy to the conversation. I'm presuming it was because of mentioning the vaccine rollout in the same breath as the Holocaust, because, of course, Andrew Bridgen had made comments about the vaccine previously in a debate in Parliament and hadn't had the whip withdrawn, so I presume it wouldn't have been...
But I think that's a good point. With one in and of itself, would that have made him lose the whip, or is it now a sequence of events? And if that were the case, and part of the whip's job is to be human sort of resources and support, does the guy need support?
So what do you think, Frank? Do you think the Conservative whips were right to remove it from Andrew Bridgen?
I don't, actually, because I think if you look at the tweet carefully, he's quoting a conversation he had with the doctor. So it was the doctor that used the analogy of the Holocaust, not Andrew Bridgen. Now, whether he ought to have been more alive and sensitive to the fact that you could upset the Jewish community and others in making that statement is another question. But equally, and take Mark's point, the vaccination rollout was hugely successful. Nevertheless, I want members of Parliament to be able to feel free to scrutinise, to ask questions, to push the envelope and perhaps to look at uncomfortable truths, because the vaccination has had a negative impact on some individuals. I know people who've suffered consequences because the vaccination was taken by them. I'm not suggesting that I agree with what Andrew Bridgen's sentiments are around vaccinations rollout and his attitude to lockdowns per se. Nevertheless, what I am protecting is his freedom to be able to ask those questions and scrutinise the government and the health professionals in that way.
A fair point, and I guess this is what the discussion is about, and I don't know what our viewers think. Should he have been allowed to have, said it, expressed it? Should he have had the whip taken off him? Should maybe even more severe consequences have come our way? We'd like to hear from you as well. And then after the news, we'll be speaking to Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant, about his take on the suspension of Andrew Bridgen.
morning. It's 10:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% between October and November. That's despite the soaring cost of living. The Office for National Statistics recorded a slowdown in growth, though, after a 0.5% increase the previous month. It says the economy was helped by people filling the pubs to watch the World Cup. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government has a clear plan to halve inflation this year and get the economy growing again. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the time for action on the Northern Ireland Protocol is now, a warning the following contains flashing images. Delivering his key speech at Queen's University in Belfast, Sir Keir also promised his party will remain a good faith guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. He's urged the Prime Minister to recognise past mistakes and resolve issues over the post-Brexit trading arrangements.
So I say to the Prime Minister, if there is a deal to do in coming weeks, do it. Whatever political cover you need, whatever mechanisms in Westminster you require, if it delivers for our national interest and the people of Northern Ireland, we will support you. The time for action on the protocol is now.
The Prime Minister, meanwhile, has announced 2 new green free ports for Scotland, creating new jobs and investment. It's part of millions of pounds of funding for the country to drive growth, including the free ports near Edinburgh and Inverness. Rishi Sunak and Scotland's First Minister held private talks last night, which Nicola Sturgeon's called constructive and cordial. 22-year-old Connor Chapman has appeared at Wirral Magistrates Court charged with the murder of Elle Edwards. The 26-year-old was shot outside a pub in Wolsey on Christmas Eve. Mr Chapman's been remanded in custody and will appear at Liverpool Crown Court on Monday. He's also been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Philip and Esther will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 10:36. Lots of you have been getting in touch already.
Yes, Liam says, hi, GB News. I can't believe Keir Starmer has just endorsed Hillary Clinton on his Northern Ireland speech. I feel he's dug his own grave aligning himself with crooked Hillary. This was an own goal.
Andy says, how dare Starmer claim the Northern Ireland peace process as Labour's greatest achievement when most of the work was done by the previous John Major government? To be fair, Keir Starmer did mention John Major's role. If signing something that was already done for you was your greatest achievement, then they really are not fit for office.
And I think I think we'll go now because we've got him here. We'll go too.
Well, before the break, we were speaking about the suspension of Andrew Bridgen, and we're now joined by Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Michael, thank you for joining us. What's your take on Andrew Bridgen's speech? I mean, Anne here, one of our viewers, says, I don't like what Andrew Bridgen said about COVID and the vaccine, but he didn't compare it to the Holocaust. He said since the Holocaust, so he should not have had the whip removed. What do you say to Anne?
Well, I would say, Andrew Bridgen was a little bit unwise even mentioning the Holocaust. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, if I may, but I just want to say I heard Starmer's speech as well. And it was the same old thing where he just says, agree with what Ireland is going to suggest, agree with what Brussels is going to suggest, otherwise we're argumentative. I mean, the guy doesn't know anything about negotiation. But to get back to your point, look, I'll be honest with you, I was brought up in a Jewish family. I'm not practicing Jewish or anything, but, it was distasteful, the comment about the Holocaust. But frankly, I was more annoyed by his comments about the vaccine, because it has saved millions of lives across the world. It's saved hundreds of thousands of lives here in the UK. Yes, there can be the occasional rare complication, but to suggest that we shouldn't take the vaccine, and later on he was saying that we shouldn't even engage in taking future mRNA vaccines, where there is incredible research going on at the moment to combat cancers with mRNA vaccines. And he just talks nonsense, because he was saying that, it's like genetic engineering on the human body. Well, that's about sensible.
But Michael, you disagree with...
That's about sensible as saying that, if you have a genetically engineered tomato, then it alters your body. It doesn't. Sorry, Philip. Carry on.
No, I was just going to say, look, you disagree with Andrew Bridgen and his concerns about the vaccine, but, some people have suffered damage from the COVID vaccine, that the government are paying out damages to people who have suffered harm from the vaccine. Lots of people are concerned that actually children shouldn't be taking the vaccine because the threat of COVID to them is so minuscule, it's not worth it. Surely members of Parliament should be able to speak out on their concerns, whether you agree with them or not, whether even necessarily they turn out to be true or not. Surely the duty of a member of Parliament is to raise concerns that people across the country have. Surely you shouldn't be always at risk of losing the whip just because you say something that you don't agree with, the whips don't agree with, that may or may not be proved to be correct, or else it's going to have a chilling effect on anyone ever criticising the government about anything, isn't it?
Well, there's two separate issues you've raised. One is what he said, and one is how the whips behave. And let me briefly talk to you about both. I mean, look, the problem with what Andrew Bridgen says is he is actually saying we shouldn't take the vaccine. And yes, as I said earlier, there have been some complications, but they're minuscule compared to the hundreds of thousands of lives which have been saved in the UK thanks to the vaccine. Look, there's always a risk. If you take an aspirin, there's a risk you may get a bleed and you might then die from the bleed. It's a minuscule risk, but you don't say don't take aspirin. You don't say don't take paracetamol. So what he's saying is nonsense. Now, the more interesting point about the whips. Yeah, MPs must have the freedom to say what they believe as long as they use a duty of care, as long as they're responsible. I'm concerned that in the future, there will be mRNA vaccines. As I said, there's research going on at the moment into vaccines which can actually stop cancers. And, if a responsible person like a member of Parliament starts to say mRNA vaccines, all mRNA vaccines, which is what he's been saying, are dangerous, then, you know, that's not
Michael
in the
van
public
Breggen,
interest at all.
Thank you very much. And I want to come back into the studio now, because if this is just about people being able to say things, debate things, which you might agree with, you might not, there's lots of things I agree with, I don't agree with, usually when you're on the losing side, everybody in the chamber will come out against you. Therefore, shouldn't we allow people to give their opinion to which they've got facts or evidence, or which payments have gone out for vaccine damages? Shouldn't he be allowed to say that? And I guess then it is the court of public opinion. He will lose his seat. He will have, you know, people up in arms.
But it's important to work out exactly what he said, and it hinges, I actually think, on one word. He begins his... If he had not used the word "as" at the start of his tweet and had merely said, one cardiologist put to me, blah, 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 he's reporting somebody else. By saying "as one cardiologist," he's endorsing it in some way. Exactly. But, I mean, I think he's medically wrong, but that, to my mind, is not grounds for dismissal. I'm not totally sure I agree with Michael Fabricant that the vaccine saved hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands, no mean feat, but I'm not totally sure Michael Fabricant's right about hundreds of thousands. But I don't think he's going to have the whip removed,
to the MP for Gravesham, Adam Holloway, because you see this in a different way. Should he have had the whip removed, Adam?
I mean, I'm actually horrified with what's going on in our country at the moment. I mean, what has happened to freedom of speech? We actually can't say what we think. I mean, we talk about diversity and inclusion and all this stuff. Well, why can't people have different views, even if they're crazy views and they're completely wrong? So for Andrew Bridgen to lose the whip is another example of the Tory party going down this, to me, frighteningly totalitarian, woke way of looking at the world. You know, I don't agree with Andrew on the vaccine stuff, but, you know, if he wants to say this or anything else, I think people should be allowed to. I mean, I don't know what your viewers think, but it is really worrying now that we're all sort of having to self-censor. If people are crazy, I want to know that they're crazy. If people are racist, I want to know that they're racist. Where is freedom of speech?
Adam,
I mean, that's a very good point. If you want to know what people are thinking, not some sort of second guessing because they've all been somehow silenced.
Yeah, Adam. I mean, yes. For Andrew to mention the vaccine rollout in the same breath as mentioning the Holocaust, I mean, would you not accept that it was rather crass and stupid of him to do that?
Well, I mean, in this world of self-censorship, you're probably wise never to mention the Holocaust. But in fact, he rang me about an hour ago, and he said he was actually quoting a cardiologist from, I think, the University of Jerusalem. You know, I want to know what people really think. I want to be able to form proper judgments on their opinions. And at the moment, in this awful, really right-wing world where we're not allowed to say what we think or express ourselves, however stupidly, it's completely different from when I was brought up. You know, we were told that we should, you know, die for people's rights to express themselves, and I just think it's very worrying what's going on in this country with all this now.
Isn't the case, though, Adam, that, you know, if a Labour Party person an MP had said this thing while Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, the Conservative Party would have said, well, here's more evidence of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. Perhaps the Conservative Party has sort of, in effect, dug its own grave in this regard by how they treated the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that's a matter for them, but certainly you, me, and Esther, we'll do what we think's right, and what's happening now in this country is wrong. And you know, I totally endorse Toby Young, you know, amazing man with his free speech union. You know, this is good stuff, and to suggest that your viewers, that the public in general, need to be somehow protected from from views like those held by Andrew Bridgen on the vaccines is quite wrong. We want to do diversity and inclusion. Well, let's actually hear what people have to say and let the public form their own judgments, and don't be so sort of almost fascist and tell people what they can and can't say.
Adam Holloway, thank you very much indeed for giving your views
Typical
on
straight talking from Adam.
But this censorship that he's talking about, you might talk nonsense, you might get it wrong, but people will absolutely clamp down on you straight away. This is what we're getting at. He's getting at the nub of it there, freedom of speech.
Absolutely, I totally agree with Adam's comments. And actually, what you're seeing here is Conservative whips adopting cancel culture. And going back to Michael Fabricant's comments, well, listen, if the Conservative Party start taking the whip off every Tory member of Parliament who talks nonsense, you're not going to have many people in the lobbies, are you?
Says our Blair right on the panel. But look, it's been hard to avoid Prince Harry over the last few weeks. Unless you've been under a rock, you'll know that he has released his highly anticipated book, or, whatever, book, Spare Is It, really, which has divided readers across the globe.
We want to take a look at what could be going on in the Prince's mind. And so, to do so, we're delighted to be joined by the TV psychologist, Honey Lancaster James. Honey, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, how do you assess Harry's mental state when you've been watching these interviews that he's been doing?
Well, the first thing I have to say is it's really important that no psychologist, no mental health professional tries to assess somebody purely on the basis of what we see in the media. Even if we are seeing an interview of someone talking themselves, no psychologist should do that. And so I sort of won't assess or diagnose or anything like that. But what I will do as a behavioural psychologist is, I suppose, give you my take on some of the things that I've heard Harry say himself about this whole issue, about why he has decided to write this tell-all book, about sort of what his motivations are for some of the things that he said, because I have found those really interesting to listen to. I think what's particularly interesting to me, because my specialist field is actually working with public figures. Our company, Onset Welfare, that's what we focus on. We work with people in the public eye who either live and work in the public eye. So I have actually heard some of these things from other people that we've worked with over the years. The great frustration of not feeling like you can actually tell your truth, whatever I mean, it's interesting. We're talking about freedom of speech, but it's interesting, isn't it, that when someone comes out and says, well, this is my view, this is my story, this is what I think happened to me, a lot of people around the world go, oh, you shouldn't be saying that, you shouldn't be saying that. But actually, I think if we do live in a world where we want to hear people's different views, to a certain extent, we have to let people tell their story and listen to what they've got to say. So that would be
I think what we were sort of concerned about, because it does seem this, it's very raw when you've seen his interviews, when you've listened to what he's had to say. Is it a very public breakdown? Watching it myself, I felt I was in the therapy room with him. So yes, he can say it, but really, are we watching something we shouldn't really be watching? It's him having a breakdown in public.
Well, I mean, again, as a psychologist, I always say there's a very fine line between a breakdown and a breakthrough. Ultimately, who knows what we are seeing at the moment for Harry? I think we have to listen to Harry about that. He says that he has been on a long journey. He says that he has had mental health support, that he's had therapy. He says that he wanted to tell this. And I think in one of the interviews that I watched, I think it was the Bradley interview, I think he says, I felt a sense of relief. So I think we have to honour that, and that's what is going on for him.
And as Kate said yesterday when she was in Liverpool, I mean, sometimes talking therapies don't work. Do you think that's right? Sometimes they don't work.
Oh, I mean, like any treatment for anything, they don't always work for everybody, for sure. But I think that's a different question. I think what we're seeing here is somebody who has lived an exceptional life, an extremely unusual life, which means that I doubt that anybody out there watching this right now can really empathise or understand what that might have been like to grow up inside that system, to grow up in the public eye, to have had no say in the matter, that you're born into this family. It's the same with anybody else. And yes, of course, those of us around the world who struggle financially or we have difficulties in our lives might look at someone who's a prince and say, well, what have they got to complain about? What hardship do they face compared to my life? And I get it.
Honey, that's what most of us. That's what most of us are thinking. But thank you for joining us, because I think that's what I was sort of looking at there. We've heard what he said with some very revealing facts, from how he lost his virginity to where he had frostbite to what he thinks of Camilla, etc. But I thought, should we have been showing it? Did the man actually need to have some more therapy behind the scenes?
Very, very possibly. I mean, my issue with him, I'm certainly not in a position to make a psychological diagnosis of Harry. But what astonishes me is his behaviour seems, just on the face of it, illogical. I mean, he's campaigned for a long time that for people's privacy, especially around their mental health issues. He doesn't seem to extend that courtesy to his family. I thought they stepped back from royal duties in order to escape the public gaze. How's that PR strategy going for him? I mean, this is a complete contradiction to that. So his story, to my mind, doesn't make sense within its own terms. That's what I worry about.
It certainly seems to be an outpouring of personal resentment that had been building up for a long time.
Unambiguously, Philip, you're right.
Anyway, on a different note, Wales captain Gareth Bale has announced his retirement from the club and international football this week. Gareth Bale's the country's most capped player, with 111 appearances over 17 seasons.
Fans in Wales have launched a campaign to rename Welsh M4 motorway bridge the second Severn crossing in honour of Gareth Bale.
Gosh. Well, we're joined now by Paul Robinson, former Spurs goalkeeper and teammate of Gareth Bale. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. So, I mean, where do you rank Gareth Bale? I mean, people are talking about him being the greatest British footballer of all time. Do you put him in that kind of category?
Hi, guys. Good morning. Thank you for having me on. He's definitely up there without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, you look at his Welsh counterparts, some of the players that played for Wales over the years. He's definitely up with the very, very best. And he's up with the best in world football. You know, there's the debate about Ronaldo, Messi, who are on a completely different level to everybody else. But what Gareth's done, where he's taken himself, where he's taken his career, he's definitely one of the UK's finest exports, if you like. And you look at his trophy record, you look at what he's won at Real Madrid. Unfortunately, at international level, he hasn't had that opportunity to do that. But I think he's had a career, which I think is, I honestly think he's finished too early. I think he's still got so much more to give. But if you get to a point of your career at that stage where you feel as though you're done, then you have to listen to yourself and you listen to what your body's telling you. But I think when he first signed at Tottenham all those years ago, he came in as a youngster, as a left-back from Southampton. I certainly didn't envisage where he would be today, and I don't think many others could have done.
Well, I mean, you played with him at Spurs. What was he like to have in the dressing room? What was he like in training? Give us a bit of a personal insight into him.
Spill the beans, in other words.
Exactly.
He was quiet, in all honesty. I mean, he came into a tough dressing room. We were a very well bonded dressing room at that time, and we had great camaraderie. And he was a young lad coming in from Southampton, and he certainly wasn't of the stature that he was now. Every time he played in his first season, you probably know this. Every game he played, we lost. So it wasn't a great stat that he had when he came into the side. And it wasn't until later in his Spurs career that he got moved further up the pitch by Martin Jol. He came in as a really slight left-back, real long, straggly hair, nothing really to him. He's built himself physically, built himself mentally, and he's turned himself into the player that he finished as today. And I think I didn't get to see probably the best of him later on in his career. Like I say, he was a youngster looking to make his way in the game, looking to cut his teeth. And he came into a dressing room where we were a lot more old and mature players, but he was more than capable of holding his own. But you could see his talent at that age. I mean, his ability on the ball and the forward thinking that he had from left back. Defensive capabilities wasn't his strength. Going forward was his strength. And Martin Jol, he saw that in him. And later in his Spurs career, moved him higher up the pitch and turned him into the prolific goal scorer that he is now.
Paul, can I ask about this Bale Bridge and, you know, this sort of tribute to him? How has this sort of got steam? I mean, this is happening sort of right now. People are looking to do a tribute to him.
Well, I think it's the power of social media and the power that everybody's got of having their own opinion now. And I think it's only fitting that there is some kind of tribute to mark his career. I mean, he's still got so much left to give to football, and it's up to him whether he chooses to do that. We all have a decision as players when you finish as to whether you want to go back to football or stay in football. But he's got the opportunity now to have a time away, to have a break with his family, and to decide what he wants to do with the second part of his life. But from a Welsh point of view, I think it's only right that his career is marked with some kind of, whether it be a bridge or a statue or whatever it is in Wales. But I think I'm not so sure he'd be too pleased with a bridge.
Paul Robinson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, it's quite fascinating. I thought, Paul, from what you've said, that perhaps it should be called the Martin Yall Bridge, because it seems from what you said that actually Gareth Bale's success is down to him. So maybe we should think about calling it that.
Or maybe you should have a set of hairdressers. I was loving the knot on top of his head.
Yeah, I think his football was better than his hair, in my opinion. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. That's it for the first hour. Coming up, should there be a minimum service level during strikes? We'll be speaking to Health Minister Maria Caulfield.
And a Kate Middleton lookalike will join us to talk about how work is drying up for the Fab Four following the royal fallout.
And a Labour councillor in Devon has proposed housing asylum seekers and homeless people on cruise ships. He'll be joining us to tell us more, so don't go anywhere.
And we've got our studio guests too, talking us through all the news.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Friday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. We've got lots coming up for you this hour.
Should there be a minimum service level during strikes? We'll be speaking to Health Minister Maria Caulfield after the news.
And we'll be joined by a Labour councillor in Devon who's proposing to house refugees and homeless people on cruise ships rather than on land.
And we'll be speaking to the world's best boss, find out how he got that title later. And we've got your views too. We'll be reading them out, all of you who've written in don't think that Andrew Bridgen should have lost the whip. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Esther. Good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% between October and November. That's despite the soaring cost of living. The Office for National Statistics recorded a slowdown in growth, though, after a 0.5% increase the previous month. It says the economy was helped by people filling the pubs to watch the World Cup. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government has a clear plan to halve inflation this year and get the economy growing again. The Prime Minister has announced 2 new green free ports for Scotland, near Edinburgh and Inverness, creating new jobs and investment. It's part of millions of pounds worth of funding to drive growth in the country. Rishi Sunak and Scotland's First Minister held private talks last night, with Nicola Sturgeon calling them constructive and cordial. It's Rishi Sunak's first visit to Scotland since taking office last year.
And a good example of that is today's announcement. We're announcing, together with the Scottish Government, the creation of 2 new free ports, green free ports here in Scotland. They're going to bring jobs and investment to the region, and actually going out and about today talking to people, they are so excited about what this means for their local area. And that's why we've seen in England that once we've announced free ports, you see companies investing more money, jobs created. I want to bring those same opportunities here to Scotland, so I'm delighted that we're able to do that today.
Well, meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the time for action on Northern Ireland Protocol is now, a warning the following contains flashing images. Delivering his key speech at Queen's University in Belfast, Sir Keir also promised his party will remain a good faith guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. He's urged the Prime Minister to recognise past mistakes and resolve issues over the post-Brexit trading arrangements.
So I say to the Prime Minister, if there is a deal to do in coming weeks, do it. Whatever political cover you need, whatever mechanisms in Westminster you require, if it delivers for our national interest and the people of Northern Ireland, we will support you. The time for action on the protocol is now.
A man has been charged with the murder of 26-year-old Elle Edwards, who was shot outside a pub in Wirral on Christmas Eve. We can cross live now to our Northwest reporter, Sophie, what more can you tell us?
Well, we learned on Wednesday that a 22-year-old man had been arrested on suspicion of the murder of Ellie Edwards on Christmas Eve. Then in the early hours of this morning, we heard police had named that man as Connor Chapman and that he had indeed been charged with Ellie's murder, as well as several other counts, including 2 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm and ammunition. Connor Chapman appeared this morning at Wirral Court and was remanded in custody. He will now appear at Liverpool Crown Court on Monday morning.
Sophie, thank you very much. Sophie Reaper, our Northwest reporter outside Wirral Magistrates Court there. A third man has been charged with the murder of a 23-year-old footballer in a nightclub on Boxing Day. West Midlands Police says 18-year-old Regan Anderson will appear at Birmingham Magistrates Court later. Cody Fisher was stabbed on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub in Digbeth just before midnight on the 26th of December. 2 men have already appeared in court charged with his murder. And a pensioner is being sentenced as we speak for the vicious rape and murder of a teenager nearly 50 years ago in the oldest double jeopardy case in England and Wales. These are live images of the sentencing. Dennis McRory is at Huntingdon Crown Court for the sexual assault and murder of 15-year-old Jackie Montgomery in her home in Islington in North London back in 1975. McRory, who was 28 at the time, had been cleared of the murder, but a swab from Jackie's body was retested decades later and showed a 1,000,000,000-to-1 match with his DNA. And we'll bring you that sentencing as we get it. Footage has been released of one of the 2 Brits carrying out emergency evacuations just days before he went missing in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian police say British aid workers Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry, who's seen in the footage if you're watching on television, left the city of Kramatorsk for Soledar on Friday morning. They were reported missing the next day. Yesterday, Russian mercenaries claimed they'd found a body belonging to one of the two men. GB News is unable to verify the claims. And tributes continue to pour in for Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis Presley's daughter, who's died at the age of 54. A warning: the following contains flashing images. It's understood the singer-songwriter suffered a cardiac arrest at her home in Los Angeles yesterday. Actor John Travolta has said his heart goes out to Ms. Presley's family. Her death comes just days after she attended the Golden Globe Awards, where actor Austin Butler took home the Best Actor award for his portrayal of her father. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Rhiannon. We've had lots of people getting in touch this morning, particularly about whether Andrew Bridgen should have had the whip removed.
Now, Stephen says Andrew Bridgen definitely should not have had the whip removed. He was elected to ask questions, not follow blindly whatever the government says. A mistake by the government.
Bob agrees. He says, I believe an MP should scrutinise and question the government, especially if they have constituents asking them to do so. I think that the suspension of Andrew Bridgen undermines democracy and smacks of toe the party line or else, and to hell with the people who elected you.
And the list goes on. Susan Andrews should not have had the whip removed. He has every right to voice the opinions of people who have suffered from the vaccine.
And Ollie says, whilst Andrew Bridgen should certainly not have quoted the doctor's comments regarding the Holocaust, it's important to remember that the House of Commons is supposed to represent society. A tiny minority of people have been adversely affected by the COVID vaccines, and Andrew Bridgen represents that minority in Parliament.
And just briefly, Christine says, amongst other things, but never has free speech been more threatened than in our current generation.
So thank you for that. Keep those views coming in. Now, Business Secretary Grant Shapps will be able to decide statutory minimum service levels for various public services under a new anti-strike bill which has been condemned by the Labour Party.
Shapps said ministers would consult on what minimum service levels would be required from fire and ambulance and transport services, but will also impact health, education and border security.
This will be debated in Parliament on Monday. And joining us now to discuss the bill is Health Minister Maria Caulfield. Maria, thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us. So how would a minimum service level work within the NHS?
So at the moment, when we've got strikes, some of the unions do work quite constructively with us to set out what services they will or will not provide so that we can make plans for those, particularly for emergency services like A&E. However, some unions, the ambulance service, their unions do those negotiations at a local level. And so nationally, we often have a little idea of what actually service is going to be like on the day. And that makes it very, very difficult to plan and make sure that patients have a level of service that is safe. And we know, for example, the BMA, who are looking at taking strike action, have said they won't provide any emergency cover. And clearly that would be extremely difficult if junior doctors are on strike and our accident emergency or wards are not covered at all. So that's why we feel it's important we have that minimum level of service so we can make people have the right to strike, but we have the ability to keep patients safe as well.
And, I mean, who decides what the minimum service level required is in each, say, individual hospital, for example, and who decides which workers have to work and which ones are allowed to go on strike?
So what normally happens is we kind of run like on a Sunday kind of Christmas service. So we know kind of the levels of staff that's often required at those times. And that's the sort of level of staffing that we need. In England, for example, less than half of the trusts the nurses have gone on strike on. So it's been much easier to plan. But in ambulance strikes, for example, most trusts have gone on strike. And so that has been much more challenging. But if we can have a sort of bank holiday weekend level of service, then we know we can provide safe services for patients.
Now, Labour will see this as a chipping away on the right to strike. They're opposing this. However, good news for the government is YouGov has found a poll that actually 56% of the public support what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think, whether it's the railways, the people who suffer the most are those who are trying to get to work and are not able to by kind of ongoing strikes. And so I think the public, and I reckon I'm a member of the union, I'm a member of the RCN, and I recognise the right to strike, and it's an important right to have. But it is important also that we're able to protect those kind of essential services that keep the country running, so that people are able to go on strike, but we're able to provide a level of service too. So I think the public get that. They're the ones impacted by these strikes. And so I think they welcome the government taking some measures so that they have at least a minimum safety service level.
Some people might say it's because you haven't been able to negotiate a deal right. So what you're actually doing is to bypass negotiations, is bringing in sort of laws that limit the ability to strike. Is that what it's about?
Well, I would disagree. I mean, I can only talk from the health perspective, but we have been sitting down with the RCN and met, the Secretary of State's met with them a number of times now. We have only earlier this week started talking about pay, which this is their big ask. They did promise before Christmas that if we started negotiating on pay, they'd call off the strikes, which sadly haven't happened so far. But I think we are making progress in that we're talking about this year's forthcoming pay settlement and what it could look like and what evidence to submit to the independent pay review body. I think the difference is that the unions want us to look at backdating a pay rise, and that would be very difficult to do. So we are negotiating. We are around the table, as people like to say. But that's why I think it's important to have this legislation coming forward, because these strikes could be going on for a period of time. And if patients miss one outpatient appointment, it may not be so bad. If you're then waiting 6-7 months for that outpatient appointment, things can start to get a bit tricky for patients. So we need to keep the show on the road while maintaining the right to strike.
Mary, isn't this, though, sort of just covering up this law, covering up the sort of government's weakness, really, in the sense that if the unions knew that the government wasn't going to cave in on any pay demands, they wouldn't go on strike. I mean, if you went out openly and the Transport Minister went out openly with the RMT and said, look, I don't get, you can go out on strike every day as far as I'm concerned. You can go out every day, go on strike. I guarantee you will not get a pay rise. Then it wouldn't take long, I suspect, for the union members to get the message and not vote for strike action where they lose pay. They go on strike because they feel, probably with some justification, that the government's going to cave in and all the rest of it. I mean, after the miners' strike in the 1980s, there weren't many strikes after that because the unions realised that Mrs Thatcher meant business and she wasn't going to give in. So isn't really the solution to this, rather than passing legislation, just for the government to make it abundantly clear you're not going to give in on any pay demands when people go on strike, and stick to it, and you wouldn't need these.
Is this
these
the
rules
Davis
then.
School of negotiation?
I'm just merely putting a different point to the minister.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I think, to be fair to the Prime Minister, he's been pretty robust when it's comes to nurses' pay, in that he wouldn't agree to a 19% pay demand, which was their initial ask. He's also been pretty clear at Prime Minister's questions this week that he accepted the independent pay review body's recommendations for the current pay year. He's not going to budge on that. He's willing to talk about evidence submitting for the pay rise that will start in April of this year, but he's not going to retrospectively backdate that to the previous year. So I think he has been fairly robust, and he's taken some criticism for that as well, in terms of Labour clearly would cave in and would offer a deal. And of course we want more pay for nurses, but we also have a responsibility to the taxpayer that we have to pay for that. And that will either come from frontline services, we'd either have to borrow the money, and we know what disastrous consequences that can have.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Thanks for taking time out to join this morning. So I'm going to turn now to Mark Littlewood and Frank McKenna. So these strikes, I have to say, there was something there that Maria said that, this could go on for 6 or 7 months. So we've got to have this law in place. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy with where the government's coming from, but rather like Philip said, I'm not really sure you can defend and define an exact level of minimum service. Maria Caulfield seemed to be saying that it's almost binary. There's some minimum level of service which is safe, and then sort of everything above that is just a nice to have. It's much more of a spectrum.
There's also different people in charge of that, which seemed to me a long time to put in place.
Very hard to define it. And I'm a bit concerned we're not getting an acceptable minimum level of service from, say, ambulances, even when they're not on strike. I mean, it's not just the problem when they're on strike. The minimum level of service seems to be poor. So I actually think there are probably some areas of vital services, in some areas of healthcare, possibly in some areas of transport, where workers should be encouraged, probably for more remuneration, to sign a no-strike deal in their contract.
Yeah, now, that could be the way forward.
Frank, Esther mentioned how that this had what the government's proposing was popular with the public. Is there a trap here for the Labour Party that, in effect, they're going to be going against public opinion and be seen to be, in effect, just caving into their union paymasters, as the government always described them as?
I don't think so. I think I was on your programme a couple of months ago when David Davis said Mrs Thatcher was fantastic at strategy but brilliant at tactics as well. And you mentioned the miners' strike. You'll remember that in 81, when the miners went on strike, she didn't take them up because the government wasn't in the right place, the right position. And the timing wasn't right for the government. The timing is appalling for the government to introduce this sort of legislation. As Mark has just pointed out, what is minimum standard of service?
Why do you think it's a bad time? That's you don't know necessarily the detail, but why a bad time?
The joke in the north is when the railways go on strike, we say, well, how could you tell the difference? Because the operators have been so bad, nothing to do with strikes, nothing to do with the unions. The operators have been so poor in organising and managing, and of course they have no incentive to improve.
Lockdown, that wasn't before lockdown. I'm on the train 4 times a week.
They have no incentive to improve, though, Esther, do they? Because the government subsidise the operator. And so I think that although people, myself included, have sympathy for this idea of a minimum standard of service, legislating for that, and as Mark's commented, having a binary choice in who makes the decision as to what that minimum level is. That's going to be tough to introduce.
Just with the railways, as I said, I'm on 4 times a week, perfectly fine up until lockdown, and then, having worked in transport as well, British Transport Police, we saw sort of industrialisation and militancy for a long period of time, and their objective was always to have it taken back into national ownership. Is this not giving them an opportunity to do it and destroy the private sector?
I think you're being very generous to the operators pre-COVID, because certainly trying to get around the north of England on a train...
Which I do.
Yeah, but it was difficult. You know, there were cancellations, trains were packed, people couldn't get seats. The West Coast mainline service, we used to criticise Virgin. I'd take Richard Branson back tomorrow over Avanti.
By the way,
a disaster.
What Frank says there, I mean, I don't think the Westminster bubble does understand how bad some of the links are across the north.
No, terrible. But I think that's more a roads problem than a rail problem. The problem, MPs, I'm told, travel about the same number of miles every year by train and by car, and that's very unusual. Most people travel much more by car than by train. I think a kind of 20 to 1 ratio. So I think actually the long-term solution to this programme is to get on and build some more roads.
Frank, I just wondered, going back to the nursing situation, the health service situation, the strike. What about it? Some people say, I hear lots of people say to me, well, look, the police can't go on strike. Why should any of the emergency services be able to go on strike? Why is it just the police that should? What if the government came forward and said, look, people can go on strike in every industry, but if you're working the emergency services, you shouldn't be able to go on strike because of, by definition, the nature of that job. What would you say to that?
I think that's a debate and a discussion that we could have. It needs to be in a government manifesto. It needs to be put to the country, and people could decide whether that was the approach they wanted to take. But I think if you look at the nurses' situation now, 2 years ago we were clapping for carers. Now we're talking about sacking nurses if they go on strike. The other issue that we have, and this is coming back to the timing issue, is that at this moment in time, we are short of carers, we're short of nurses. So what are we going to do? What really is the government's penalty for people who go on strike? We're going to jail them, we're going to sack them, we're going to say to trade unions, we're going to fine you. Because go back to 71, and Heat's
that's
government
where
tried this.
I think what
You got
Mark says
battered.
comes into a point where you said, well, give them a pay rise. This is what you say, because then you'd say you can't strike, but here's a pay rise so you know what your conditions are. And some people might say that's the way forward.
Yeah, I think you can devolve this down a lot. I mean, you can almost leave it to any individual worker. If a worker wants to say, well, I'm very keen to be a work on the railways, but I do want the right to withdraw my labour at a moment's notice if I'm a bit cheesed off about something, well, you might not be able to command quite such a high salary as if you say, I promise I will turn up on time, morning, noon and night, whenever I'm contracted to do so, and will never go on strike. And it could be horses for courses. I think we should offer some of these key workers no strike deals, and obviously enhanced remuneration or, I don't know, greater annual leave or a better pension or whatever would be part of that package.
Free market, that's
exactly what I
come
thought.
to expect from me.
It's an old-fashioned view, isn't it?
Very old-fashioned.
Anyway, thank you both for that. Coming up, we'll be joined by a Labour councillor who's proposing to use cruise ships to house asylum seekers and homeless people. So don't go anywhere.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's pretty blustery out there right now. The winds will be easing a little bit through the day. Most of us will see some sunny spells, but there will also be some showers around as well. This area of low pressure is clearing away, but there's a lot of isobars on the chart, hence why it's so windy. And this weather front is kind of dragging its heels, and that will be where we see most of the showers through this morning across parts of Northern Ireland, feeding into northwest England and North Wales. Showers will keep going in northern Scotland too, some across the southwest, but many central and eastern parts won't see too many showers. A good chance of a dry day from Yorkshire down to Kent. As we go through the afternoon, I think we'll see the showers easing in the southwest and for Northern Ireland. We'll always keep some coming into southwest Scotland and northwest England. Temperatures getting up to 7 to 10 Celsius generally, but it'll feel colder than that with the wind. Although, as I said, that wind will just ease down a little as we go through the day. Then more rain pushes into Northern Ireland this evening and across Wales. That spreads its way steadily northwards, and look at this, more rain then coming in through tonight, and that's going to make for a pretty soggy start to the weekend. Before that rain arrives, temperatures will drop down into single figures, but as the rain arrives, it's bringing milder air, so we start the weekend in the south in double figures, but we also do start with a lot of cloud and further rain. It could cause some further issues because it's been so wet. We'll be seeing snow on the hills across Scotland as that rain pushes northwards. Should clear from Northern Ireland, at least for a time, before the showers get going. And the rain will then push away from England and Wales during Saturday afternoon. So it will turn drier through the day. It'll probably also then turn colder. We could get up to double figures in the morning, but come the afternoon, temperatures certainly in the west will be dropping away once more because colder air is following on behind. And that's going to be a feature into next week. Through Sunday, and particularly Monday and Tuesday, colder air returns, which means the return of frost and ice. Bye for now.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 11:26. We've got lots of your views coming in.
Steve says, I do think we need to give nurses a pay rise, but they've already had interim rises over the past 2 years, and I can't help thinking they are being led by a militant, politically inspired union leader.
And Nick says all services that are publicly funded who choose to go on strike should be forced to refund the public funds and subsidies. Why should the public fund strikes?
Ellie says the NHS needs to be privatised. It's far too big to be run by the government, and the great deal of money received from a private sale will go to other public services that need it. It would also see a reduction in income tax for everybody to be able to pay for insurance for their own health needs.
Interesting that people are here calling for the privatisation when they see it not working properly.
I should just read out what...
It could be the unintended consequences of lots of strike action.
I should read what June's furious. She's made that point. She's furious, so I better read out, June, what you've put. She said, why in the name of all that's holy is Sunak giving millions of pounds to a country that supposedly wants to leave the Union? Sturgeon holding out the begging bowl whilst all the time hating the English. It's time all this money was spent on England instead of him giving it to everyone else. So there you go, June.
So that's how you get your comments read out. Put your furious, and that gets Philip's attention. Now, a Devonshire council has announced it will be considering the use of cruise ships to house asylum seekers and homeless people. Leader of the Labour group on Torridge District Council, David Brenton, said that radical times call for radical measures. And Councillor Brenton joins us now. Do you want to...
Good morning.
Hi there. Do you want to explain how this would work?
Well, the basic theory behind it would be that we would hire a cruise ship, a river-style cruise ship, because of the depth of water that we've got in our estuary, to house people who are on the waiting list, and also we've got a fair number of Ukrainian refugees in the area who are coming to the end of their 6-month period with their host families, and anybody who is perhaps a rough sleeper or whatever.
And so, David, I presume people wouldn't be trapped on this ship; they'd be able to come and go freely. Is that? Am I right in presuming that they would just be where they stayed? They wouldn't be forced to stay on there all the time?
No. Well, our council's unique insofar as we actually own a harbour side in Appledore, so it would be moored alongside. Right next door to it, of course, is where Appledore shipbuilders are, and they've built some very substantial vessels for the Royal Navy, and they've always moored alongside, so it's perfectly doable.
Going back to your point, Phil, there, is this to ease a burden of sort of demand on the housing stock, or is this to separate those people from the rest of the public?
No, it's not to separate anybody. No, we've got a very serious housing problem in our area because of Airbnb and second homes and all the rest of it. And, of course, the very high cost of housing. People just simply can't afford to buy, and a lot of them can't even afford to rent. So it's obviously a short-term measure. It's not obviously meant to last forever, but it's better than what we've got now.
What's the feedback been of local residents to this proposal, David? Is it commanding widespread support, and when might it come into force?
Well, it varies, I have to say. Obviously, some of the people in Apple are very happy about it, but around the area generally, some people think it's a good idea. And in terms of coming to force, well, that really does depend, A, on what's available out there in terms of shipping and the cost of it and the logistics of setting it up. But that, in theory, of course, you could have it all set up in a month, but that clearly isn't going to happen. But it would be very quick. We do have, as an authority, various schemes to provide social housing in the area, but they're months, if not years, down the line.
David, I know that this is you're proposing this to deal with a particular local issue, but obviously a housing shortage is a national issue as well as a local issue. Would you encourage the government to do this on a wider scale of people who are coming into the country claiming asylum, having them on ships rather than having them in housing in the local community? Is this something you'd like to see rolled out across the country?
Well, obviously, it's really not suitable for across the country. Clearly, you've got to be on a coastal area for starters. So I don't think it is a national thing. I think it's be good for our area, possibly, but I don't think nationally it would.
David Bridgen, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us and share your proposal for what you'd like to see happen in Torridge in Devon. Thank you very much.
And a lot of people can be sympathising with that.
Well, I ask,
a massive housing shortage.
Because lots of my constituents say that when these people come over on dinghies from France, rather than distributing them all around the country, why don't you put them on a big ship at Dover? What's your view, Mark?
Well, I mean, it is pretty imaginative. When I first read this story, I thought this has to be crazy, right? But I'll give this councillor credit for imagination. But the bit that's crazy, which is not his fault at all, or this council's fault, is look, by and large, ships are more expensive than homes, right? If you want to go and buy a 2,000 square foot house, it will be expensive. A 2,000 square foot boat will be a lot more expensive. So I think this highlights exactly how bad the housing crisis is. We've got so few homes, we're going to start buying cruise ships to house people. Surely the long-term solution, not that this particular council can easily do it all themselves, build more homes. I think we're about 3.5 million homes short of what we would need if we wanted to have the same home-to-person ratio that most of the EU does.
But you can feel that tension bubbling up across the country. Maybe our viewers will have a view on that. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this crisis for where people can live?
Anyway, coming up, we'll be talking to a Princess Catherine lookalike, who fears for her future job following the royal fallout. But first, it's time for your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Philip. It's 11:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom, and we start with some breaking news just in. A pensioner has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years for the rape and murder of a teenager nearly 50 years ago. It's the oldest double jeopardy case in England and Wales. Dennis McGrory was sentenced at Huntingdon Crown Court for the sexual assault and murder of 15-year-old Jackie Montgomery in her home in Islington in North London back in 1975. McGrory, who was 28 at the time, had been cleared of the murder, but a swab from Jackie's body was retested decades later and showed a 1,000,000,000-to-1 match with his DNA. The economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% between October and November. That's despite the soaring cost of living. The Office for National Statistics recorded a slowdown in growth, though, after a 0.5% increase the previous month. It says the economy was helped by people filling the pubs to watch the World Cup. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government has a clear plan to halve inflation this year and get the economy growing again. The UK and Scottish governments have announced that 2 areas in Scotland have been awarded free port status. Ministers say the 2 new green free ports near Edinburgh and Inverness will create 75,000 jobs. It's part of a £52 million investment to drive growth in Scotland. It's Rishi Sunak's first visit to the country since taking office. And Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the time for action on the Northern Ireland Protocol is now, a warning the following contains flashing images. Delivering his key speech at Queen's University in Belfast, Sir Keir also promised his party will remain a good faith guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. He's urged the Prime Minister to recognise past mistakes and resolve issues over the post-Brexit trading arrangements.
So I say to the Prime Minister, if there is a deal to do in coming weeks, do it. Whatever political cover you need, whatever mechanisms in Westminster you require, if it delivers for our national interest and the people of Northern Ireland, we will support you. The time for action on the protocol is now.
A 21-year-old man has pleaded guilty to throwing an egg towards the King Charles, during a walkabout in Luton last month. Harry May pleaded guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court earlier to a Section 5 public order offence. Mr May admitted to the offence because he says he thought the monarch's visit to what he describes as a poor area was in bad taste. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Esther and Philip will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back at near 20 to 12. But spare a thought for this woman. Lots of people are going on strike, but this woman wants to work. Britain's best Kate Middleton lookalike fears her work following the bombshell royal memoirs. With demand drying up, for the Fab Four. So joining us now is Heidi Aggan, the UK's most realistic Kate Middleton lookalike, and you certainly do look like her. I said that straight away. I hope she looks like her. Well, absolutely you do, just as gorgeous. So tell us what happened. There you were, busy, but the fallout from Harry and the book Spare, nobody wants you guys.
Not as four anymore, unfortunately. So it is really, really, really sad that we only get to work sort of as a two now.
Well, couldn't you sort of update, as it were, your act and have like a public spat and people go, oh my goodness, we're capturing this live. This is now what they really think of one another. Just a suggestion.
I think we kind of prefer not to offend anybody. So
doesn't seem to worry Harry.
We're all friends actually in real life, so I don't think it would work for us to have a spat, because we do all get along. You know, I spoke to the Harry and Meghan lookalikes yesterday, so we're all friends and we all get along. So for me, it's just really sad that we don't all get to work together anymore.
Well, maybe you change your job, you all get on. Maybe there's some sort of therapy sessions the lookalikes could give for the real ones and reach out, maybe.
Maybe, who knows? But, you know, hopefully somewhere there is some reconciliation for them all, because it is, you know, such a sad event, such a private family matter that's now come out into the public. So hopefully, for our sake as well, that they can resolve some of their issues.
Heidi, I'm interested to know, how did you become a Kate Middleton lookalike?
Because she looks like
No,
Kate.
I know, but I mean, how did you become I can't...
How do you go about it? You see, I look like Kate, so what do you do?
Look, I understand these problems because I'm often mistaken for Brad Pitt, but so I understand how difficult this can be. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't just happen by accident, I don't believe. Obviously, Heidi looks like her, but I can't believe that she hasn't done anything to make herself look a bit more like her and whatever. And so how you then become also sort of employed on that basis. It's one thing looking like somebody.
Get in touch with an agent.
It's another thing to be becoming an official Kate Middleton lookalike. So how does that happen?
It's I think it's always somebody else that tells you look like somebody because you just see yourself. So I was working at a restaurant and a lot of the customers were wanting to be served by me or having a picture with me around the time of Kate and William's wedding. And it was a family friend who said to me, you know, you should try and do something with this. And I didn't, because I didn't believe that lookalikes were a thing. You know, I didn't think that you could actually make a living looking like somebody else. Turns out you can. So I contacted an agent and got my first job 4 days later, and that was 10 years ago. So I've been really lucky, really, really lucky with it.
Have you actually met? Have you met Kate?
The closest I got was I took my children to Sandringham when Charlotte was christened, and my daughter did scream quite loudly at Prince George, and he did sort of turn around and wave to us. So that was the closest I got. But I think I've heard they know of us and do think that we're amusing, but I don't think we'll ever meet them.
Heidi, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And, you know, if Kate ever wanted a day off, you could absolutely stand in for her. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Absolutely.
So now that you...
She was good, wasn't she?
Well, yes.
I could maybe... What do you...
I think the Brad Pitt shout was a good one.
Do you think... You
for somebody else, maybe.
Angelina.
You could do George Clooney, could you...
I don't know about George Clooney. I've been told I look a bit like Daniel Craig. Sadly in a suit, not in his bathing costume.
And about a foot and a half taller, aren't you?
I think I am.
Yeah.
Mark, do you look like do you look like anybody in particular?
You used to be told I looked a bit like Jimmy Connors, but I never saw that at all.
I can see that actually.
You say it, yeah.
I
do feel sorry for Heidi, but I feel even sorrier for whoever the Harry lookalike who she's working with is. The bottom must have truly dropped out of that market, I would have thought, in the last few days.
Brilliant. Anyway, Frank McKenna, Mark Littlewood, thank you very much indeed, both of you, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Excellent. Now, the Prime Minister has announced 2 new green Free ports for Scotland, creating new jobs and investment. It's part of millions of pounds of funding for the country to drive growth, including the free ports near Edinburgh and Inverness. So let's have a look and listen.
And a good example of that is today's announcement. We're announcing, together with the Scottish Government, the creation of 2 new free ports, green free ports here in Scotland. They're going to bring jobs and investment to the region, and actually going out and about today talking to people, they are so excited about what this means for their local area. And that's why we've seen in England that once we've announced free ports, you see companies investing more money, jobs created. I want to bring those same opportunities here to Scotland, so I'm delighted that we're able to do that today.
Joining us now to explain more is GB News political reporter Olivia Otley. Olivia, good morning.
Good morning. So what we've got is this new agreement. Rishi Sunak has promised these 2 new free ports, one in Inverness, one in Edinburgh. That'll involve £52 million of funding to green startups in those areas, and also plenty of tax incentives to encourage people to invest. And Rishi Sunak over the last 2 days has been on a real charm offensive in Scotland. If you think back to Liz Truss's very short premiership, she said that Nicola Sturgeon was an attention seeker and the best policy was to ignore her, and she didn't go up to Scotland at all. Rishi Sunak's policy is very different. He's been engaging in talks with Nicola Sturgeon, and he's at pains to point out how cordial and constructive, words we keep hearing, those talks have been. That said, of course, there are plenty of issues that the two disagreed on, and it sounds like their meeting last night, although cordial, can't have been particularly friendly because it was just so controversial. The NHS came up, and Nicola Sturgeon has said today that Rishi Sunak hasn't promised any more money for the NHS in what sounded like a bit of a dig. And Rishi Sunak got his own back with a dig back at Nicola Sturgeon on independence. Of course, he disagreed with Nicola Sturgeon on independence and said that in both London and Edinburgh there should be relentless focus on what really matters to the people of the United Kingdom. The other issue which came up, which is incredibly controversial, in fact so controversial it was thought that it wouldn't be brought up in that meeting yesterday, is the Gender Recognition Reform Bill in Scotland, which has caused a lot of concern in the UK government because of the impact it could have on English women. For example, if someone with a gender recognition certificate came to England, a male-bodied person, could they stay in a women's prison? Lots of difficult issues there. At the moment, Kemi Badenoch is threatening to block the bill, Alistair Jack, to block the bill's procession, block royal assent, essentially, which would be pretty much unprecedented. And Stephen Flynn, who's the new Westminster SNP leader, has said that this is not just a question about the bill, it's a question about democracy. So there is a big fight brewing there, and it definitely isn't going to calm down anytime soon. So, yes, the meeting was cordial, and it does look as though the relationship between Number 10 and the SNP is softening a little bit, at least from where we were at in the summer. But with all those enormous issues to disagree on, we're not going to have a breakthrough anytime soon.
Olivia Otley, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It looks very, very nice in Inverness where you are, so we're very jealous looking at your backdrop. But thank you, Olivia, for joining us this morning.
Now, we've had lots of you getting in touch with your views, and Millie says, privatise all the hospitals. When you need an operation, just get a voucher that you can use in any hospital. Then the government pays the hospitals the patient's choices. That will bring standards up. I did say that. There's going to be unintended consequences of these strikes going on for so long.
Adrian says a simple solution is to cease to allow blue light services, nurses and doctors the right to strike, but in return they will get the same percentage rise as MPs get each year. That way there's no discrimination and everyone is treated equally. Just to let you know, Adrian, IPSA decide MPs' pay rises, and they have a formula whereby they give MPs the average of all pay rises across the whole of the public sector over that same year. That's how MPs' pay rises are determined. Whether nurses and doctors are happy to have the average across the whole of the public sector or not, I don't know.
And Janet says, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but Ukrainian refugees are living on an old cruise ship at Leith Dock in Edinburgh. That comes on the back of an interview we did a little bit earlier on about David Brenton, a Labour MP there in Devon, saying, can we put homeless people and refugees on a cruise ship?
And Glid says, if we repatriated the millions that have come here over the last 15 years with their begging bowls, there will be plenty of housing for everyone. plus less pressure on our vital services. We are just the begging bowl for the world. Thank you for all those views. Plenty more that we could have read as well, but we've
got time for them all. We've had so many.
We've got, exactly, absolutely. But it's time to welcome Sarah Robertson to join us to look at the biggest stories from the entertainment and showbiz world.
What a busy week it's been,
has, hasn't
both
it?
of you. Yes, a lot going on. So I'm going to start off a little bit of sad news, I'm afraid, to start with this morning, and that is the untimely death of Lisa Marie Presley, which is just utterly, utterly tragic. I was shocked when that news broke last night from America. Lisa Marie, only daughter of obviously the late Elvis Presley, rock and roll legend, was found collapsed in her bedroom. Her ex-husband tried to perform CPR on her. They got her into hospital. They managed to restart her heart after she'd gone into cardiac arrest, but unfortunately she did not make it through. And it is just utterly, utterly tragic. She was only at the Golden Globes a few days ago where she congratulated Austin Butler for his win for playing her father in the movie Elvis. And she said how thrilled she was for him and to be able to see her father be brought to life on that way on screen and to share him with us, which is something she was always very proud of doing.
How was she there? How was she there?
She looked a little bit frail, it has to be said. There was at one point she said, "Oh, can I hold onto your arm?" when she was being interviewed. And she did look quite frail in herself. And a few days ago as well, her last Instagram post was talking about National Grief Awareness Day because she lost her own son, Benjamin. He took his own life at the age of just 20. So Lisa Marie, I mean, she's just gone through tragedy, unfortunately, through most of her life, drug addictions, failed marriages, obviously the loss of her father when she was just a young girl, and most importantly, the loss of her child, which is something no parent ever gets over.
When you're the daughter or the son of
Yeah.
such a massive, massive global
Yes.
star, it does seem to cast a shadow on
right.
your children's life for some time to
Of
come, whether
course.
it's expectations or whatever. And again, he died, her dad, you know, again, a sad, tragic sort of life, you know. I mean, again, it was a wonderful film. I don't know if you saw the Elvis film, but you felt there was sort of exploitation going on. Everybody wanted him to work up as down as to go and perform, loved his audience. So, you know, a tragic sort of family.
I just still can't believe it. I still can't believe it, Esther. It's really, really shocking. You know, I thought that sort of, as you say, that tragedy, family tragedy, ended with him, and then obviously we saw his grandson took his own life. But it's just so sad. She was such a beautiful person, and Priscilla has her mum. My heart just goes out to the whole family. It really does. Very, very sad news indeed.
Any happier news in the show?
Yes, we have. So let's go on to some happy stuff, Phil, for you. Some TV news, which I think you'll enjoy. So Love Island returns on Monday.
Is this happy news or...
Well, I mean, I was very fortunate. I got to interview the boys this week for Love Island. Yes.
Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to.
They were like, do you want to interview the girls, Sarah, or the boys? I said the boys.
No, they always seem to be in swimsuits. Were they in swimsuits for their interviews, or were they
weren't
fully
actually.
clothed?
They were stuck in hotel rooms in South Africa in some secret location, and we had loads of problems with the Zoom links. Sorry. I wish I could have been flown to South Africa for that. It wasn't quite as glamorous. ITV's budget doesn't cut to as far as that. Sorry. But yes, they were fun. I've already picked, I think, what could be a potential winner.
Oh, go on. Let's go on and write this down.
Out of the boys. So... Yes, so a couple of them really took to me. Well, I took to them, shall I say. And I think Shaq's got possibility. He used to work at an airport. He's got quite a personality. I could see him doing quite well in there. He seems really nice. But the guy that I'm really rooting, who I think is really going to win, is the school teacher called Kai. So, Kai, K-A-I.
And why is that? What did he have? What star quality did he have?
Very handsome, a real air about him, gravitas, seemed a lot more mature and older for his years, and I can see him having the career when he comes out with that. And I think the girls are all going to really go for him. I really liked him. I really liked Kai. So I've got the money on him.
Got the glint in her eye, Sarah.
There
you
go. But there's a bombshell because one of the Macclesfield footballers, Tom Clare, he's announced it as the Love Island bombshell. So I didn't get to interview him. That was all kept secret. And then that was just announced last night. So that's going to ruffle feathers. So he might end up doing very well as well. So there you go. So anyway, I don't know if you'll be watching on Monday.
Probably not, if I'm honest.
Not.
How about who dares win? I don't watch watch that much, but I am now because I'm going to check out this card.
Yes, you have
but
to.
Who Dares wins, because we all know who's in it.
We do. So that's coming back. There's going to be From the Jungle in Vietnam this year. Different, so they're really spicing it up. It's going to be, I think, the toughest SAS Who Dares wins that we see. There's another new chief of staff coming in.
Is this the
Yeah.
thing? This is the thing.
This is the one Matt Hancock's in.
Yes, Jungle, yeah. So we've got a new chief of staff, 20 new recruits going into Vietnam. It's starting on Sunday the 23rd of January. Sorry, forgive me. And yes, it's going to be quite dark. But we've got a new chief of staff. They've had another reshape because remember when Aunt Middleton left. There was quite a few people gone, and then they shook it up, and they've got 2 new recruits from America to come and obviously put the guys through their paces.
Through their paces. It's going to be
but now
grueling.
we've got another one. We've got Chris Oliver, so they've gone for a Brit. They've got rid of one of the Americans. They've got rid of Remy Adeki. He was one of the Americans. He's gone, and now we've got Chris Oliver, who is ex-Marine, bit of an Aunt Middleton type figure, and he's come in. So it's going to be interesting. And also, I think having it in the jungle as well in Vietnam, I'm really looking forward to that. It's one of my favourite shows on telly. So
if people
would you ever do it?
No, you're joking, aren't you? To kill me. There'd be a by-election in Shipley if I had ever attempted anything like this. Good God, no.
Who knows? What about you, Esther? I think you do quite well, actually.
Esther would be better than me. She
thank you.
She definitely defeated me.
You do quite well at Celebrity SDSC.
Well, first of all, we're going to check out what they have to do.
It's
see what
hard.
they have to do, but no, yeah.
It's
I'm not
hard.
going to imagine that. It's grueling. You have to do all the practice and work for it. No, it's not for me.
But sometimes the people you don't think they can end up really surpassing, and the girls actually do better a lot of the time than the guys.
Why is that, do you know?
It's because I remember Aunt Middleton saying it's all to do with tactical thinking. So it's not about actual raw physical strength, it's about tactical thinking and how you think your way out of situations.
There you go.
To make it work, and you're clever. You can do it.
Oh, there you go. Thank you very much indeed. We'll end on a flattering note. Thank you. Always seems right to do that. Thank you for joining us, Sarah, there. But that's all from us today, and thank you for joining us, and thanks for all of your comments too. We'll be back 10 a.m. Tomorrow. We'll also be back next week 10 a.m. But up next is the wonderful Andrew Pearce.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's pretty blustery out there right now. The winds will be easing a little bit through the day. Most of us will see some sunny spells, but there will also be some showers around as well. This area of low pressure is clearing away, but there's a lot of isobars on the chart, hence why it's so windy. And this weather front is